as the current president of the Friends of Lanphier Memorial Library, I'd like to welcome everybody this evening to our first of the season Tuesday talk series. We have 3 talks typically scheduled in the spring and 3 talks scheduled in the autumn, figuring that people are too busy doing wonderful things in the summer to take advantage of some of these programs. So anyways, I'd like to welcome everyone and look out for next month's program with Garrett, Garrett Buglian, who will be talking about cults and cult theory and cult thoughts. But meanwhile, tonight we have Theresa, and I will pass it over to Jenna to introduce Theresa Snow from Salvation Army. Welcome, everyone.
Well, I'd like to say how pleased I am that Theresa is with us this evening. I heard her speak a couple of years ago in Stowe and was very impressed by her presentation and by the organization. Salvation Farms is, I guess you're headquartered in Morrisville, right here. So I was very pleased that you were able to join us tonight, and looking forward to your talk. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for the invitation and for having me. I'm going to try to transition to my presentation as smoothly as possible. So thanks again for having me, and for all of you that made time this evening to join the conversation and to learn about the work, vision, philosophy of Salvation Farms. As I've been introduced, my name is Theresa Snow, and I am the founder and executive director of Salvation Farms. We're a nonprofit organization. We're based here in Morrisville, Vermont, and our work has local, statewide, and national reach. And our work aims to engage local people with local farms in a way that will lead Vermont towards eating more of what its farms produce. Now, if you already know of Salvation Farms, it might be because of our gleaning work. That is how Salvation Farms got its start. We started that work right here in the Lamoille Valley, where Morrisville is centered. But what Salvation Farms does and strives to influence goes way beyond gleaning. But let's start there. Gleaning is the act of reaping after the harvest. The folks pictured here, they're gleaners, and they're picking spinach that the farmer wasn't going to sell. I'm curious if anyone wants to speak up and share with me, why do you think this farmer wasn't going to pick this spinach?
I'm guessing it's not commercially viable for him for some reason.
Great guess.
Diane,
anybody else have a thought?
Yeah, you all can unmute yourself, but Diane put in chat that one of the reasons might be no staff.
Okay, yeah. Great guess. Well, those are both really fabulous guesses. And the interesting thing about this scenario, this picture was taken on a Mother's Day. This spinach had been planted actually the previous fall, and the farmer had allowed that planting to overwinter, and that spinach started growing as soon as it could in the spring. And so that farm was able to pick very early the finest baby spinach off of this planting. It was a big field. And this farmer was able to get it to market when nobody else was bringing spinach to the market. And they were able to cut, baby spinach out of this field more than once, because the way you pick it by leaf and it grows again, you pick it by leaf, it grows again, and eventually it just gets big. So this spinach is actually a bit overgrown, and it's totally marketable, very edible. And the farmer actually could have sold this spinach, but he knew that all of his neighbor farmers were just coming into some of their first baby spinach. And he wanted to compete on par with his neighbor farmers. And you can see in the row, the woman with her purple jacket. That's this farm's next planting of spinach. And that's baby size spinach. And he realized, I'm going to go into that planting and I'm going to make this planting available for gleaning, because I don't want to glut the market and unnecessarily compete with my neighbor farmers. This morning, we left shortly after this picture was taken. We picked 660 pounds of spinach. And after we left, all of the spinach that remained behind these folks was tilled into the soil. So before I talk more about Salvation Farm's mission and work, I want to offer a little bit of context. I encourage all of you to hold your questions till the end. I may prompt you again, just like I did. But I think the content that I'll provide will be good fodder for a conversation after the presentation. So what this on your screen shows is that nationally, the United States wastes 63 million tons of edible food annually. Really, what is 63 million tons of food? Well, that's enough edible food to fill the Rose Bowl every single day of the year. And we do that every year. What I find pretty amazing about this graph is, if I'm trying to think if you're looking at the right side or the left side, underneath where it says refed, it shows a little house. That represents our homes. 43% of all edible food waste happens in our homes. The next one over, 40% happens in places where we access food. Everything from supermarkets to restaurants to cafeterias. So an astounding 83% of all food wasted in this country is at locations where we interface with it, where we have power over that reality. A very small percent is wasted in manufacturing or lost in manufacturing. And then a remaining 16% is lost on the farm. Salvation Farm's mission does not really focus on the food waste that happens after it leaves the farm, what we call the farm gate. We focus on the edible food that remains on farms, and we consider that food loss versus food waste. So, what is the difference between food loss and food waste? Food loss is when edible food goes unharvested or is harvested but remains unsold or is not donated. And food waste is edible food that ends up in the waste stream and eventually in the landfill. So why does food loss happen? Why does edible food stay on farms? And there's lots of reasons why food loss happens. I'd love to hear, there were two thoughts around why that spinach wasn't picked, but can anyone name any additional reasons why a farmer might not harvest edible crops?
It looks ugly.
It could look ugly. Why might they pick it and then not sell it?
Good question. I don't know if it's a matter of they don't think they're going to get enough money for it. But then again, some money is better than no money, possibly, but I'm not a farmer, so I don't know if that rationale is backwards or not.
Well, isn't, Theresa, in some cases, like with milk, that it costs too much to actually distribute it, and so that's why it gets spilled, or there's no one to get it to that can process it.
Yeah, I love this. So everything that you all have mentioned now or in the previous slide with the spinach revolves around economics, really. One thing that's important to note is that farmers always try to produce enough food to meet market demand and safeguard against the unexpected. You know, for example, weather and pests are good examples of the unexpected. Planting a little extra is like an insurance plan. So sometimes, you know, surplus on farms is just that, it's surplus, but most of it is economical. The product, it just might not be economical to harvest. You know, think if a farmer has competing harvests and, you know, they're faced with the option of picking some head lettuce or hothouse tomatoes. They're going to go with the hothouse tomatoes, which means likely the lettuce may not get picked and sent to market. Farmers plant things in multiple plantings. Think green beans and broccoli and like that loose leaf spinach or salad mix. And they'll go through and they'll pick broccoli at its prime, and they're going to move on to their next planting when they have prime heads of broccoli, and they're going to leave some in that last planting. The same with string beans. They're going to pick it when you've got a heavy flush. If any of you are gardeners, you know the first couple picks off green beans are great, and then the last 3 or 4, you know, they're pretty sparse. So a farmer is going to always be producing when it's most efficient to pick. Often farmers are faced with unavailable or unaffordable labor issues, and that will leave stuff in the field. Some have capacity issues, that they might not have enough storage capacity or even containers for the volume that they produce. And sometimes it's market saturation. You know, a lot of folks are aware that there's some produce that also just doesn't look perfect and it doesn't fit the marketplace. And so that will often also lead to surplus product. So Salvation Farms, we did a study here in Vermont trying to find out how much edible food was left on Vermont's produce farms. This was the first statewide study in the nation, and we surveyed farmers asking for them to estimate how much edible food did they think they were leaving in the field, and how much edible food did they harvest but not sell or donate. And we took those estimates, and they were percents of guesses by our farmers, and paired that with census data. And as a result, we found, based on farmer input, that upwards of 14.3 million pounds of edible vegetables and berries remain on our state's farms each year. And the reason I say edible vegetables and berries is because no orchards responded to this survey. So if we considered our orchards and our tree fruit, that number could be considerably higher. What I find particularly astounding is that farmers predict of the 14.3 million pounds, only 32% is left unpicked in the field. You know, they're almost estimating 70% of this edible food is already picked. So what does 14.3 million pounds of produce look like? Well, that pallet of carrots, that's about 1,000 pounds. And a standard size pickup truck can fit about 2,000 pounds of root crops. So if we were to put just 14.3 million pounds of root crops, potatoes and carrots, into pickup trucks, it would fill more than 7,000 pickup trucks. And if you lined them up end to end, they would extend more than 26 miles. That's the distance from the Waterbury exit to the Burlington exit. And I like to call it a marathon of nutrition. And if we aren't talking about root crops and we're talking about greens or berries, you know, it's likely to be a much longer line of pickup trucks. Now, one thing I like to put into perspective of that You know, there is this food loss that's happening on farms. Meanwhile, our state institutions alone, like hospitals, schools, and prisons, they're spending upwards of $10 million a year to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables from outside Vermont. So Salvation Farms, we've really been thinking about this for a while. You know, how can Vermont make better use of what its farms produce? We've engaged a lot of colleagues in different conversations. We've tried to think about, well, what kind of strategy can Vermont have to broadly manage the surplus its farms produce? Because kind of to your point, Jack, about milk, it's not just produce. There's proteins, there's animal meats, as well as fluid milk. We've done asset mapping, trying to figure out, well, what kind of infrastructure might be available? What are the opportunities for this surplus food, particularly if we could reduce what we're bringing in from out of state to feed ourselves? And we've modeled different responses, you know, both to serve the charitable purpose, but also to look at how we can serve institutional needs, again, like schools, prisons, and hospitals. This image that's on your screen resulted from several of our efforts, but one in which we talked to some colleagues, advisors, to get some perspective from them of what they thought Vermont could do with farm surplus, paired with what we knew could happen as well. You see in the top center, the farms. You know, farms can take this product and they can till it into their soil, they can add it to their compost, they can feed it to animals, they can feed it to themselves and their workers. They could even sell it to other animal farmers. Then they can also send it to donations, you know, to engage gleaning organizations, to have direct relationships with local food shelves or the Vermont Foodbank. They could make some of this food available to their local institutions. Some farms do give to their local schools where their children go to school. And there could be some meal prep or prepared food sites. So like our Meals on Wheels programs and our senior meal sites. And then another avenue is market development. This product could serve restaurants. They don't need perfect looking food. It could go into farm stands. Consumers, when they have a relationship with a farm, they tend to be willing to try new and different looking things. So farm stands, farmers markets, CSA shares, that's where we can start to move some of this other food to consumers. There's also opportunities for sales to institutions, also processing. How do we take this food that might be blemished or not look perfect and turn it into something that hides those imperfections? It makes it easier for someone, whether it's a person at home or a school food service worker, to use this food. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to tell you a kind of basically a story of some of the things Salvation Farms has done, hopefully helping make more visible some of the opportunities that we think could have both short-term and long-term impact in our state's food system by putting to use Vermont's surplus farm produce. So when produce is left on farms, some of it is eaten by the farmers, their families, and their employees. But often a large amount of this food is tilled into the soil. Some is added to the compost pile. And some will be fed to animals. And these are all good, resourceful uses for a farm. As I like to say, the unharvested or unsold food becomes an input and serves to become food again. You know, farmers are not wasteful. That's another reason why Salvation Farms does not call food left on farms as food waste. Farmers are incredibly resourceful, and if this isn't serving its first purpose, which is to support their business by sending it to market, they'll find another way in which this food can also serve their business. However, Vermont's surplus farm produce could also feed our communities. And we're going to look at where and when surplus crops might exist and what could be done with it to help us feed ourselves. And we're going to do this by following a carrot from the field. You can see the field behind the two women outside. That is all carrots that a farm is growing to put into storage. And then you can see the other two women on the right standing in front of these massive wooden bins that are full of carrots and other root crops. Those have been, of course, grown in the growing season, and now they're being stored through the winter for washing and sorting and selling, and even into the winter or into the spring and early summer months. Pretty amazing what some of our farms are doing with storage. And here's a farm crew, and they're sorting through the harvested and winter stored carrots, removing the carrots that won't meet market specifications. So basically they're packing for market and culling out, what won't make the grade. And those crops might look like this. While we like to think of this food as naturally beautiful and edible, they most often are not marketable. And then for carrots that don't make it out of the field, if the farmer hasn't picked it, they might invite the farmers to enter the field to harvest what the farm can't afford to, or what they don't have the capacity to store, or what they don't have a market for. And when surplus produce exists, it can be for many reasons at varying volumes, like in large bins like this one, full of twisted, broken, oversized carrots, or in smaller volumes. These volumes are often best collected with the help of volunteers and distributed to community-based charitable food programs, like food shelves and senior meal sites. But the larger volumes most often need additional handling, washing, sorting, packing, some into larger packs and some into smaller packs. Salvation Farms believes this washing and packing is a great opportunity for workforce development and job readiness training. I really want to note that while all of these are Salvation Farms images, the one previous, this one, and the next two are images from our Surplus Crop Food Hub and our training program. Salvation Farms operated this food hub and training program between the years of 2016 and early 2020. Much of this work, we know farmers can't afford to. We know the private marketplace can't afford to. And we're trying to look at how do we add value into the system in a way that can handle this food, make it available to more people in more places, in a way that works in our economic system. And our answer was to incorporate workforce development. We can create more positive impact by doing it this way. And our training program includes certifications. Our trainees receive first aid CPR training, Serve Safe training, OSHA training. They learn transferable hard skills like shipping and receiving, assigning a lot system so that they can trace a product as it comes in the door all the way through cleaning and packing and back out. They learned how to work as a team, how to quality assess a product, how to take a raw product and create an end product. Many of these individuals learned how to use a pallet jack, and that was a huge moment for many of our trainees. This training program also involved guest presenters, folks who would teach them about compost, talk to them about financial literacy, talk to them about working with farmers and helping farmers find market outlets. They were exposed to documentaries about the food system, about hunger, about food waste, about obesity and malnutrition. And we went on several field trips with our trainees to show them that what they were learning in this facility could transfer to a variety of employment opportunities, from working in a produce department to working in a deli or cafe to working in a shipping receiving area, to working in even food manufacturing. So we really wanted to bolster their skill set so that they could see the array of opportunities available to them. We also supported them in job searching. And one of the strongest elements for these individuals were the moments when volunteers would come and work with them, because they had their own rapport with their fellow trainees. When there were new people in the space, they got to teach others what they had learned and modeled the expectations that they held for each other, for these new volunteers supporting them. It was a really powerful part of this program. So in handling of surplus produce at scale, coupled with job training, unmarketable produce is sorted and made ready for packing. It is important, as I've already said, that this work is not profitable for farmers to do. You can see the carrots there that are all hairy and they're starting to sprout and they're even a little slimy. Those were donated to us, I think in March or April. Horse picked the previous fall, and the resulting carrots are clean, trimmed, and ready to go out to people. Farmers can't do this. They just can't afford. It's easier to compost them or to feed it to animals. But through this process, some crops are identified as not suitable for distribution in their whole raw form. So in that big bag or in those little bags. And then, these crops, they are set aside for minimal processing. In this case, they were made into a frozen product. So what Salvation Farms has tried to do is figure out what in our food system needs to be developed so that we're making use of this food that currently doesn't have a use or doesn't have an outlet. And we've taken a food product that would have gone into the compost pile. We have cleaned it and packed it, and we're going to distribute that to some outlets. And even the product that is basically culled twice, it wasn't even good enough to go out in that package, we're going to make into a frozen product. So we basically saved it twice. And for the crops that don't make the cut for either raw packing or minimal processing, they're sent off to be compost or turned into animal feed. So Salvation Farms' mission, I haven't told you that because I think that if I had told you in the beginning, it might not have made much sense. Our mission is to build resilience in Vermont's food system through managing agricultural surplus. Basically, how do we help Vermont feed itself more locally by using what it produces? We have goals to reduce food loss on farms, increase the use of locally grown foods, and build greater appreciation for Vermont's agricultural past and future. It's really that last bullet. Well, the other two are so important. How can we build appreciation for the agricultural past and future of our state and our population is by engaging people in the work. We are firmly rooted in ideals of sustainable agriculture, resource management, and experiential education. We do think that farms are our salvation. Eating is such an essential thing, and I hope that every one of you do it every single day, right? It's something that is so crucial to every single one of our lives. The experiential education component of Salvation Farms work, the engaging people in our work, we believe that people have the power to create change. And in order to reduce our overall vulnerability, not just those that are in need today, but all of us that depend on systems that are outside of our control. We need to become intimately familiar with systems that support our essential needs. So by engaging people in our work, whether they're volunteers or trainees, or whether they're people that receive the food that we might donate to locations, they're learning about what Vermont farms grow, and they're learning about when that food is available seasonally. So that if for some reason trucks don't drive into Vermont to stock the shelves of Hannaford's or Shaw's, we're all going to feel a little bit more familiar and comfortable using what our farms produce. So I want to thank you again for this opportunity to share Salvation Farms' work and our vision with you. There's a lot more that I could certainly share, but I think that's a pretty solid foundation for some context of our work, why we do it, what we've tried to do, and what we are doing. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that any of you have. And there's my contact information.
How many tons of carrots do you move?
Carol, I don't have the microphone on.
Well, I'm wondering first, Jack, when I should stop sharing my screen, if I should keep it up.
You can go ahead
Um,
and stop sharing it now, and then we can go to gallery view, if that's okay.
Great,
All right.
that's great. So how many tons, I'm gonna remove the spotlight. There we go.
Yay.
How many tons of carrots? Well, last year, we moved 5.5 tons. I've got my grid right here. We've done more of carrots in the past. But in total last year, we moved, roughly 70,000 pounds of produce. That would be over 200,000 servings. So.
Beth Springsteen asks, what areas of Vermont do you work in? Do you limit yourself to Lamoille County?
Right. So we've worked all over the state through different partnerships. We've worked in Rutland County. We have worked in Windsor County, in Windham County. Our primary base for our gleaning program is Lamoille Valley. We've worked in Chittenden County. We have advised programs from Grand Isle Franklin to Washington County, to Addison County and Rutland. So I think it really depends on the partners that we have. Our food hub was based in Winooski, so that operation with our training program was in Chittenden County. But a lot of the food we handled from that space went across Vermont, and some of it even left Vermont. It's amazing with this amount of food sitting on farms. There's a very small amount that's actually being captured, about 5%, by all of the programs out there doing this work. Between Salvation Farms, the 6 other members of the Vermont Gleaning Collective, the Vermont Foodbank, and still we can't move it because we're trying to move all of this food in its fresh form in season, when it's, when there's already such a volume of fresh food. So some of the product that we moved through Winooski, some of it went as far as West Virginia.
Wow.
Yeah, we do provide technical assistance to other organizations. So right now we're working with an organization in Rhode Island and another one in Colorado, helping them look at their business models, their organizational systems, how they work with farms, how do they keep data. Also been advising most recently another program in New Jersey. But I think it's hard to point to where our programming serves. We really strive to serve Vermont broadly by modeling opportunities that could be replicated anywhere in the state. We worked for a while in one of our state's prisons in Windsor. The state has 6 prisons now, so that programming could happen in multiple locations. We are looking at some new partnerships, primarily in the Northeast region of Vermont, to do some of this work, to help us make some frozen product, as well as to create another new gleaning program in the state. We'll provide them 3 years of technical assistance. So.
Theresa, I have a question for you. Is there any public interface where, like, someone like me who might want to not necessarily have a CSA, but decide that I want to go pick some spinach before it gets turned under? And is there any kind of a program where you could pick some and give some, so like you could pick some for yourself and pick a bag for yourself, pick a bag for the food shelf or the food pantry or whatever program, is there any kind of situation like that where I would think that would be kind of fun,
Yeah. I think Salvation Farms works to try to be an operational complement to farms. So what we want to do is provide a professional service to farms. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story and answer your question more directly, but what has led us down the path of serving more charitable food sites, so food shelves and meal programs, is because we don't want to compete with farms in the marketplace. So when we go to farms and collect what they're not selling, we have to have a degree of discernment about where we're going to send that food. We don't take free food and give it to schools because those schools have dollars where they can invest in farms. However, as it relates to volunteers who come out and glean with us, we like to say first that you're coming to, one, help us serve this farm, help this farm feed its community in a way that it can't afford to. And we pick for the community first. And often there's extra, and we encourage volunteers to take a little bit home. But it's often not the thing that we say, come and get food for yourself and help us pick for others. Because we want to be really mindful of what that might mean for the farmer, particularly if our volunteers are able to support the farm financially. So, that makes sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, it'd be very interesting for a farmer, let's say if they had, it's a lot to organize volunteers, so they wouldn't want that kind of a program. As far as I was thinking, maybe if they wanted to invite folks out to help them harvest in trade, and I wonder if that's more like the U-Pick situation specifically.
Right.
Yeah. Theresa, I had two questions. One is, how does your organization as a nonprofit sustain itself? And second, for those of us who would like to be allies of your work, how do we support you?
Yeah. Oh, it's a good question. Tell all of your friends about us. It's really important that people know that Salvation Farms exists, that we do important programming that serves this community in ways that have daily impact in people's lives and ways that have long-term impact in Vermont. But even outside that, we're really trying to influence the food system in Vermont so that we all can be eating locally grown foods, whether we want to or not. So I think talking about us is really important. Volunteering is also another great way to get involved. So you can visit our website, and financially supporting us is another great way to be involved with Salvation Farms work. Donations of any size are great. We just love to have people join our work in whatever way works for them. So we are a nonprofit, so we do fundraise. As the founder, I often forget that that's part of my job because I do this because I love this work. But fundraising is a really important piece to sustaining this organization. We have individual and business donors, so like yourselves and like the companies you've worked for or work for or own. We do some special events. Sometimes businesses will do cause-related marketing things for us, like MoCo, for example, might do their roundup for us. Rock Art Brewery did a beer for us. We do a lot of grant writing, about 60 to 65% of our income is from grants. And that's not just one grant. We can have anywhere from 12 to 24 grants in a year. We have received very little state funding and have received to date no federal dollars. Just this year, we approached some of Lamoille Valley towns to see about taxpayer support. And that was approved in some of Lamoille Valley towns. So that's really exciting to be on town budgets. We do generate a little bit of revenue. Some of the product that we move, we actually buy from farmers and we actually sell it so we can generate some income. That's primarily sold to the Department of Corrections for use in the prison meal programs. We also earn revenue by providing technical assistance to organizations and other contract related work generate income, but primarily through grants, individual donors and business donors, primary revenue.
Theresa, you mentioned there, even with your wonderful work, which it seems, if I understood you correctly, that comprises maybe only 5% of the food utilized that would otherwise go to waste. Is there any other, it just seems to me like there should be something else out there to be able to reclaim more than just 5%, considering you're saying that there's like however many tons of food that are just left in the fields, if even the farmers aren't using. So how do you capture more?
A really great question. And that is the question, I think. There's a couple different things that Salvation Farms would like to do in addition to continuing our programming, which shows this opportunity. It makes visible that this reality exists out there. We want to do a more in-depth study to find out really how much food is staying on farms, for what reason, and what is its condition, and is it in the field or is it after harvest? And is there a way for farmers to track that and notify folks in a timely manner that it's part of their operation to do so? Can we start to understand so that we're starting to predict what crops at what volumes are available in what regions of Vermont? Once we know more of that, we can start to say, okay, we produce 20 tons of extra sweet corn between the middle of August to the beginning of September in Bennington County. We know we need that in the Northeast Kingdom. Right now, we don't have that kind of planning or communication to actually move that product. We also don't have the infrastructure to say, well, how do we make that corn into creamed corn, right? Because all of a sudden, if we can make it into creamed corn or even dehydrated corn, I'm not sure if people dehydrate corn except for popcorn, but if we were to make it into a product that had some shelf stability, then all of a sudden we don't need to move it to the Northeast Kingdom. We can store it and it can be used by institutions like hospitals and schools that are used to using foods that are pre-prepared and shelf stable. So essentially what the issue is that we don't have the, excuse my language, the industry language, we don't have the supply chain to make good use of this food. And therefore we're trying to move it fresh. And just like, there's only so much zucchini Vermont can eat. So just think of that. Like when the farmer can't, in your gardens, you can't sell this zucchini anymore. You try to give it to the food shelves. Well, they don't want anymore. So, well, then what do we do with the zucchini? And that's where there needs to be supports. And we have tried to create private sector, public sector, and nonprofit sector partnerships so that we could have basically kind of subsidized operations that could support through job training, or maybe it's a corrections, like the Department of Corrections, maybe it's a corrections-based program where we could offer valuable working and learning opportunities while handling this food that the private sector can't afford to do by itself. And so identifying what the real volume is of these types of crops and when they're available will then help us also justify, well, what kind of infrastructure do we need? Is it enough volume in Vermont that we produce in winter squash that can't go to market because it has a ding on it to justify a canning line to make pureed winter squash? Do we produce enough soft onions in Vermont and zucchini to create a dehydration facility to make this food shelf stable? So that's it's a complicated answer that's really focused on thinking innovatively, thinking generationally, and taking some risk on investment.
So Theresa, how did you get to be where you are today? How did you get to be able to be the founder of Salvation Farms? What got you from point A to point B?
Right now it's a Toyota pickup truck. But actually it was then too. It's interesting. I was talking with our new employee earlier today about my personal story and what led me into this work. Agriculture has always been a part of my life. I remember my grandparents had a dairy farm. My parents were small scale homesteaders when I was very little. So my first memories are really connected to the garden and our dairy farm. And then I like to say, then I was a teenager, and there was a part of me as a teenager that was a little. I challenged things, I questioned things, which sometimes as a teenager isn't always healthy, but it is healthy to question things. And I think that questioning mind actually helped lead me to this work. But really, it was my time at Sterling College. I studied agriculture and natural resource management at Sterling College in Craftsbury, Vermont, and learned a lot about basic needs and life skills. Also about things like the exploitation of populations and natural resources. I became pretty passionate about fighting genetic engineering and the work that was doing to control some of our food supply and our source. And I thought that I was probably just going to work for a farm and have my own little homestead. But I ended up enrolling in a AmeriCorps program that I would go into when I finished college. And then I was, after that, probably going to farm and homestead. But this AmeriCorps experience happened, the timing was pretty impeccable. I think probably most of you know that life just kind of rolls out in front of you and gives you opportunities that challenge you to learn and grow. So this AmeriCorps program, ultimately, I was responsible for a team of my peers between 18 and 24 years of age. And we did service projects. And our very first service project was assigned to do disaster relief after the collapse of the World Trade Towers in New York City. And I wasn't there immediately after September 11th, but I was there about 6 weeks after. And I lived in a hotel in Times Square, and I'd walk to this massive building on the Hudson River where there were dozens of different social service organizations. And every day I'd go to this Family Assistance Center for the Red Cross, and I would try to see if there were services that the Red Cross could provide people that were seeking support. And I worked directly with people who lost their jobs, who lost their homes, and also people who lost family members on that day. And what really hit me working with these individuals, of course, being in downtown Manhattan, very far from Morrisville, Vermont in Lamoille County, and Sterling College for that matter, it struck me that the people that were coming to ask me to help them had put all of their eggs in a basket that really was dependent on commerce and a monetary economy. That these individuals had no home or land-based economy to fall back on to meet some of their most essential needs. And coming again out of Sterling, where I learned how to camp in the winter and how to brain tan a hide and do fire by friction and some basic survival skills, but also being from Vermont and knowing that we have, we can grow our own food and there's wild edibles in our backyards, and that the earth produces medicine as well. It's really hard. And I didn't leave that experience knowing that I was going to set out to try to change the world. It just kind of hit me, and I really struggled for a number of years, that I felt the culture was on a bit of a perilous path, that people were really distracted from what was really important. Company is important, companionship, but really what do we need? We need food, we need water, and we need to stay warm or cold. And I think people have really lost touch with that. And I was really struggling with how separate people were from the earth and the food system and farms. And I still didn't know at that point that I was going to do something about it. I was working for Pete's Greens, and Pete saw that I was having a relatively hard time. And he said, "What the heck do you want to do?" He wanted me to keep working for him, but he knew that I was struggling. And I said, I want to teach people about farms. I want to teach them about food. I want to help my community feel like they have some agency over something as basic and essential as meeting their need to eat. And he said, "Well, I have some extra greens. Can you do anything with them?" And ironically, while I was at AmeriCorps, I was also exposed to this idea of gleaning. And I said, maybe. I said, I bet I could engage the community to help me pick what you're not going to sell. And I can teach those people about farms and local food. And then we can move this food into the community to feed people that, that aren't buying your food. And then we can teach them about your farm and the food you're growing. And he said, okay. And then it's just kind of, it just has unfolded from there, and I think they have a degree of persistence, as well as that questioning, as well as a bit of I'm a hopeless optimist. You know, some days I'm not as positive as others. I just see tremendous opportunity. And I think that the opportunity doesn't come from one organization doing everything. It really comes from through partnerships and collaborations. And what I like to say is leveraging who has the skill, who has the knowledge, who has the resource, and let's fold it in to the project with this other skill, this other resource, this other knowledge, so that we become stronger together. So that's my story.
Thank you. It was
Right.
awesome.
Great story.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Theresa,
Oh,
thank
should
you.
more people follow their instincts and paths to create what you have?
Well, I thank you. And it's moments like these where it's validated. Some days it feels hard. And I do think that there's been a lot of fuel on the fire, you know, in that drive to want to make change. And I've had, you know, I've countless people prop me up, you know, whether it's team members, of which 3 are here tonight, board members, my family, yeah, right? Donors, you know, farmers, you know, this like Salvation Farms is really, it's something that is, yes, it's something I started, but it's something that's so much more. And I think that's where its real power comes from.
Good.
How many farms do you actually work with in Lamoille County? Like how many number-wise are part of your team, in other words?
Yeah, so this last year we worked with 20 farms, and say probably it's always around a dozen, give or take. And some of those farms, you know, like Pete's Greens, it's where we started, you know, and they're a big farm. Then we work with them year round. We're there almost every single week of the year. And then there's, you know, Rusty Bird Farm, which is a small farm that maybe will call us once a year and say, hey, I've got this extra stuff. Can you come and get it? So we work with farms of all different sizes and at all different frequencies and in different scenarios. Some we just pick up what they've already harvested, and some we go into the field. We do work with, well, we actually created the statewide network of gleaning organizations, of which there's now 7 members. They represent 7 different regions in the state, which is quite exciting. And they work as a community of practice. And that network of gleaners, they're serving 100 and I've got my annual report right here. But they're serving, 125, 126 farms, at least they did last year. You know, so that really, that network itself creates such a reach for the service to farms and a collaboration. Many of those organizations work together. So we work with an organization that serves Washington County. We're going to be working with an organization that is going to be serving the Northeast Kingdom. So it really builds power across organizations. And the number of farms that we were working with through the Surplus Crop Food Hub would average between 8 to 12 a year. There were certainly some bottlenecks in that program. There was only so much capacity we had to handle volume, and only some, you know, a certain degree of farms that had the kind of volume that we would need for that operational system. And then brokering, when we buy surplus from farms and sell it, we're working with a very few right now. I think we've worked with, I would guess, less than 6, between probably 4 or 5. Last year it was just 2 farms, but in the past we had worked with some more.
Cool.
Yeah.
since you started in the city with your inspiration, have you been able to draw any city folks to the country to kind of see what farms really are all about?
No, well, maybe. I think we've engaged a lot diverse populations in our work, which has been a really amazing thing about Salvation Farms. We have brought a lot of young professionals into Vermont. We're a huge fan of AmeriCorps programming. So there's a VISTA program, and we've brought many folks in to Vermont through hosting them, and then they stay, which is exciting. But as far as, volunteers or our trainees, we're certainly exposing new people to farms. I think about some of our trainee population. One individual was a truck driver who moved up here because he was losing his eyesight, and I don't know if he'd ever been on a farm. And we, had him out gleaning and handling produce, and he, ended up being employed at a cafe. We've had single moms and individuals post incarceration, who I assume never thought that their life path would take them through farming. But some of my favorite moments really are seeing people start to question things they don't always think about. We don't think about how the food gets to our plates. And so whether that's a trainee or when we worked with the inmate population, or being in the field with volunteers, to ask questions about, like, why is this food sitting here? Why is this not going somewhere? And having a realization also that it's not because of the farmer, that there's these other forces that is keeping that food there. I think there's a really beautiful thing in volunteering in this work. And I think some of this work has to rely on volunteers, but not all of it. I've seen people from very different walks of life meet in the field, with dirty knees from picking produce and having conversations that they never would have had otherwise. They never would have had a conversation. I think of a woman who joined us before church, and we had a youngster with us who needed to do service through restorative justice. And like that morning stands out for me as one of the most powerful, of seeing those two work together. So I'm not sure about city folk, but a lot of different people have been engaged in our work.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions for Theresa?
I was curious about the training portion of it, where you're talking about people cleaning the produce and repurposing it. Can you speak a little more, how does that program work? How does it source food? Is it temporary? How do you get individuals to become part of that program? Just like to learn a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, not at all. Thanks for the question. Well, I should just preface by saying that right now we're not operating that program, but our hope is to reinstate some form or iteration of it, and likely in service to the Northeast Kingdom, unless a partner brings us in to consult in creating something like this in another area of the state. The training program was 16 weeks in length. We tried to enroll up to 8 people, so it was a cohort model. They'd start at the same time and end at the same time, and they'd go through this progression of training where we'd stack experiences and skills and certifications and the documentaries and the field trips, try to build their awareness and skill sets in a thoughtful way. The individuals all faced some sort of barrier to employment, real or perceived. And they committed to work with us for 5 days a week from 9 to 3 each day. And we designed our program so that they would be compensated. We wanted the experience to feel as much like work as it possibly could, so that when they transitioned to employment, they could be successful, both in earning a wage and meeting the expectation of, a 9 to 5 or an 8-hour day job. We would recruit individuals for this program through a lot of different social service partners. It was based in Winooski, so we had a huge array of resources available to us through the greater Burlington area. But the Department of Labor would refer individuals to the program, probation and parole, the Housing Authority, the Community Justice Center, the Community Action Agency, different safe houses. The list was quite long, from Vogue Rehab and VABAR. And, we would go through an application process and an interview process with individuals. As far as the food was concerned, well, maybe I'll tell you a little bit about some of the barriers. So we served individuals with physical, mental, emotional disabilities, individuals that were post-incarceration, some of violent crimes. A lot of training programs don't allow individuals convicted of violent crimes, and we didn't want to create that barrier for individuals. So we did our best during our application process to vet risk. Individuals who were recovering from substance misuse, individuals who had experienced homelessness, also single parents, folks who were just looking for a change and not knowing what to do next. And some folks that were descendants of refugee families, and also some transitional age youth. The produce that we would handle, mostly we have existing relationships with farms, so we just had to promote this as an opportunity for farms. So it's like building another layer of service that, there's this gleaning work out there, and there's this brokering, this buying of your surplus, then there's large scale aggregation and donation. So if they have product that they've washed and packed and culled, that they know they don't have a market for, then they can let us know and we can arrange transportation for it. We would pay for that product to be transported to us. And it doesn't have to come to us in any sort of cleaned and packed way. That's what we have a program for. So there are some farms where we would have every week or maybe every 3 weeks, we had this pickup arrangement where we knew that they'd have at least one pallet worth of product for us. And this is where we started to engage some other for-profit businesses, as we paid Black River Produce to haul for us. And we had an arrangement with them where and still do, where we pay them a per pallet rate, whether there's 25 pounds on that pallet or 2,000 pounds on that pallet. So what we tried to do is also watch and reach out to farmers when we were aware that they might have extra, to let them know that this service was available. So we're a member of the Vermont Vegetable Berry Growers Association, and there's a lot of daily listserv chatter, and you'll often see when farmers have, they'll post when they have extra stuff. So that answered your questions.
Yes, all of them. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? So to Theresa, before we wrap up, we've got maybe 10 more minutes at most.
Ask another one if you have time and no one else has anything else. I guess along those lines, like, do you see any avenues to expand, or kind of like what's your goals beyond that? I could see you taking a program like that, potentially expanding it and, kind of taking some of those prepped foods, selling them to restaurants or organizations like that to kind of feed in and grow out the program. Do you have any, short-term or medium-term goals or anything you're looking to do in that time frame?
Yeah, yes, but we have really tried to and aspire to build these approaches through collaboration so that it isn't fully Salvation Farms that's responsible for doing all of this stuff, and that it is more held by more food system players, and also that it's regional. So we are looking to the 4 Northeast counties of Vermont to see how well can we create a coordinated effort through collaborative partnerships to scale some minimal processing, possibly anchor a job training program with large scale cleaning and packing, to have that model rooted somewhere through committed partners where we would have a role, but it wouldn't be our full ownership. And what we want to do is with that model, is then be able to look at other regions of Vermont and other potential collaborators to help them get similar work up and off the ground. So, and that's hard to do. I underestimated how hard that would be. If we just wanted to do it by ourselves, we probably could be much further along than we are in helping this happen for Vermont. But, my perspective is it has to be something that's integrated in order for it to be stable long term, meaning that it has to have cross-sector and community commitment. And it can't just be a nonprofit that's constantly fundraising to do this work.
Makes sense.
Okay,
Thanks.
good. Sometimes I don't know if only I see it or if other people.
No, that's definitely like you could basically, your whole business could focus on building that, where it makes more sense to, be the facilitator for it, have communities take ownership and scale it. So I agree with that approach.
Any other questions for Theresa? I can't see a lot of faces, so I'm assuming that there's audio somewhere out there. That's great. Thank you so much for your time, and I've certainly learned a lot. I have a gazillion other questions, but for another time. This is fascinating work, and it's essential work. And considering where we're heading as a planet, I think it's critical to our well-being to remain as local as possible and to not be wasteful. And so I think you're doing very important work, and I congratulate you for it, and I thank you for it. So anyways, and thank you for sharing your time with us.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you closing out that way, because this really is about thinking of the time that we're in, and how can we be more responsible, particularly when we think of climate change and the vulnerability of systems, which we've seen in this last year. So thank you for your time. And I would say, if you want to learn more about Salvation Farms, you can visit our website, salvationfarms.org. We do have a Facebook page. We also have an Instagram account, and we do have a blog. So, and you all are welcome to sign up to volunteer, become donors. We'll keep you informed as to all that we're up to.
Thanks so much. Have a good night. Yay. Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, so I think Jack had to divert himself to another program, so people can just leave the meeting, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening.